Hi there, you're listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Every week I talk to individuals who have experienced Sasquatch in some way or another, so you won't want to miss an episode. Make sure you're subscribed on the platform that you're listening to, and share this episode with a friend. It does not cost a thing, and it helps the show continue to grow. If you'd like to hear Bigfoot Society episodes early and ad-free, you can do so by becoming a Patreon supporter or a YouTube channel member. Links to those are in the show notes. In Bigfoot Society, I've taken far too much of your time so far, so let's get on with the show. Three, two, one. All right, Bigfoot Society, got the privilege of talking to Al Santariga today. Some people might know him. Well, actually, most people might know him as the Squatchfather. How's it going today, Al?
It's going good, Jeremiah. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm excited to talk to you. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, and we finally were able to get you on. You reached out and said, hey, I got some time, so let's make it happen. You are out from the great state of New York, and you've been involved with quite a few things out there. For example, you're the founder director of the New York State UFO Project, the New York State Sasquatch Organization, the New York State Dogman Project, and also the director of the North American Dogman Project, New York State chapter, and also a member of MUFON, many different things. Any other things that you'd want to make sure that you know?
Absolutely. The Bronxville Paranormal Society is the mothership of all of these things. But it all started from there and then branched off into different little genres.
Absolutely. I'd love to know right off the bat, what's the story of the name, the Squatchfather? That sounds like it could be pretty interesting.
I was doing a show for Chris Reinhardt from Discover Sasquatch. He's from Connecticut. And, my heavy Bronx accent and being Italian, you know what I mean? So he came up with the Squatchfather, and it kind of just stuck from there.
That's awesome. Are you from a certain part of New York that you'd be okay sharing for context?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I grew up in Yonkers, New York, and spent a lot of time. Yonkers is like an extension of the Bronx, since I spent a lot of time in the Bronx as well. Growing up. So I mean, like, a lot of people can't understand me because of my New York accent. You know what I mean? They have a lot of trouble understanding what I'm saying sometimes. So, or they'll say, "Oh, is that a Brooklyn accent?" I'll say, "No, that's a Bronx accent."
Absolutely. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, so I heard the New York accent a few times, so I get it. It's a good sound. I like it. I'm curious to know. I always like to hear. What was it that first got you into Bigfoot in the beginning?
Well, I mean, that's easy. My brother is a parapsychologist, and he always had books in the house that on all kinds of things, all aspects of the paranormal. He used to work with Han Holzer's right-hand man and their psychic. I think her name was Ethel. And so, my mother was a psychic. My aunt was a white witch. I had a cousin who was a black witch. You know what I mean? And so the paranormal in my family was just normal. And one thing led to another. I remember, I must have been 10 years old with all of my cousins. We all lived in the same neighborhood. It was like a dozen of us. We went to the movies one Saturday and see James Bond or something like that. And at the end of the movie, they had the Patty Giblin film. And I remember turning to my cousin Dino and saying, "Man, that's real. That's no hoax. That's the real deal, And, of course, all my cousins, broke my chops over it and stuff, but I just had a gut feeling from the moment I seen that video that was the real deal. And then, every Friday we used to have to take books out of the library to read over the weekend in school. So I was always that kid with the Loch Ness monster, the abominable snowman. I was that kid who had picked up all those books, the UFO books, the ghost books. That was me. So that's how it got started.
I love
with the
that.
Bigfoot.
That's so good. Just being able to see that footage in the theater, that must have been incredible. What a privilege to be able to see that at that point in time when they were showing that in the theaters.
Yeah, I mean, on that big screen, it was great. And then, I was about 10 at that time. 2 years later, I had my first Bigfoot experience down in South Florida. That was just insane. And, after that, I wasn't a believer. I was a knower, and the rest is history,
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you had do you feel you had a skunk ape sighting down in South Florida, you said?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had a major sighting down South Florida. Absolutely. Not only was the creature walked right by our house, I mean, literally right along the side of our house, but it attacked a wild horse in our development, and it ripped the head off a Brahma bull too. You know what I mean? It's a crazy story, and the night it ripped the head off the Brahma bull, my brother-in-law and sister were just getting home from a night out in Miami, and me and my cousin Anthony were babysitting the kids, and we heard some like horrific scream. We didn't know what it was, and then we heard a shotgun go off, and we jumped in my brother-in-law's car to go see what was going on. Long story short, we got caught behind a deputy sheriff doing a patrol, and everybody was looking to the left because that's where he had his spotlight, because that's where the swamp was. And the creature ran out from the right, and he hit it with his car. And when he hit it, I mean, my brother-in-law, when the creature got back up, it limped over to this police car, and it punched this police car with like a hammer punch with both hands. And the back of the car came off the ground. And my cousin Anthony was sitting in the front seat, and I was in the back, but I was hanging out of my brother-in-law's sunroof. So it was right there, a car length away from me, screaming, and the scream just goes right through you. I mean, every fiber in your body vibrates, and it's just unreal. I mean, I tell people all the time, be careful what you wish for, because the first time you see this creature up close and personal, your brain will not be able to comprehend what your eyes are seeing. And that's just like a little tidbit of the experience. There's so much more that goes on with it, but I don't know where you want to go tonight, so we'll just keep going.
That's very interesting. So, man, it almost makes me wonder, did you ever see if you could get like a released report about that night? I wonder if they had to write anything about, a skunk ape punching out their car window or anything like that.
Well, it was crazy because that particular summer, 1974, down in South Florida, there was a drought, and there was fires in the Everglades. And my sister lived right on the edge of the Everglades in a development called Sunshine Acres. And all the creatures were coming inland. All the animals were coming inland. And there was a lot of skunk ape reports in our area from local sheriffs and state police and stuff like that, and county police. And then it started happening in our development. And when that particular incident happened, we thought for sure that the next day there would be all kinds of news reporters at our house, because we were the only witnesses to it, because the sheriff was actually coming around the far end of the development. It was like a big square, 2 mile square. And when he came down and he seen the car totaled, he was like, what happened? And he was taking our report. He took the deputy's report. He said, why don't you shoot it? Back then, they carried the shotgun in between the two seats up front. And the deputy just said the shotgun wasn't big enough, I always say the creature was about 9 feet tall, maybe 900 pounds. I'm probably being light on his weight. But he was a big boy. He was definitely a big boy. And And when we found out that I had ripped the head off of the Brahma bull, I couldn't believe it because I had seen that Brahma bull up close and personal, and that Brahma bull was like the size of a minivan. If he was 2,500 pounds, he was an ounce, and I just couldn't believe the strength that this creature had, and so we thought we would have all these people come to our house because that night the sheriff called in the state police, the county police. They came in with helicopters, they came in with horses, they came in with dogs. 1974, South Florida town we were in, it's called Davie, was still a cowboy town. The biggest thing that happened in that town was the rodeo on the 4th of July. Every pickup truck had 3 rifles in the window, you know what I mean? And they couldn't find anything. And we thought for sure we were going to be interviewed, but no one ever showed up at our house. And I gave that report to the guy who ran the Skunk Ape Museum in Florida, and a woman from the BFRO. Her name was Ree Magalith or something like that. She was the director for Florida. She had read it, and she reached out to me, and she put together this comprehensive sightings. It's on the BFR site website. It's called the South Florida Skunk Ape something or another. But she actually got area shots of Sunshine Acres, the development, and she showed where like the horse rancher lived, where the cattle rancher lived, and all of this stuff. And then she, at the end of my thing, a woman named Sevilla Erin, she's an artist.
Yep.
She did a artist sketch rendering of what I seen. She put that in the report, and then she put like 30 other articles in the newspaper, all that happened around that time in there. And then she went on to tell me, she was like the same age I was, and her father, she lived in the next town over, and her father had a business in Davie. And she went to tell me that her uncle was a police officer in the next town south of us, New City, I think it was called, something like that. And he had 2 books, the official report and the unofficial report. And that particular time, they were getting a lot of calls for peeping Toms. And when they would get out there and try to sneak up on the peeping Tom, it was a skunk ape. When they hit him with the flashlight, and the skunk ape would jump into the swamp and swim away, And so they had an official report and an unofficial report. And she was going to get her uncle's unofficial book on all the sightings that happened then, and she was going to put out a book at some point. I don't know if she ever did, but she did an amazing job on my experience when she wrote it up on the BFR website. And it's just crazy. I mean, she put so much work into it. I was blown away by what she did. Just really above and beyond the call of duty.
That sounds absolutely, excuse me. That sounds absolutely incredible. I'll definitely have that in the show notes because I'm seeing the link already.
Okay.
But man, this is such a wild story. Going back to the Brahma bull. So was that a thing where the act of like someone saw the skunk ape actually rip the head off, or was it a thing where the creature was found and there is enough evidence where it's like, okay, this is what must have happened?
Well, no, what happened was it was 2:00 in the morning. It was pitch black out. Okay. And the farmer, the cattle rancher didn't have any lights in his pasture. And my brother-in-law and sister-in-law were getting out of the car, and my brother-in-law had asked us if there was any action, and we said no. And then we heard this blood-curdling scream or cry, and no one knew what it was. It was definitely not the skunk ape. We've heard the skunk ape at this point go off, in the swamp. This was not the skunk ape. No one knew what it was. But then right after that, we seen the shotgun blast coming from the cattle rancher's farm. So we knew something had happened there, and when we got there, eventually we followed the sheriff to the cattle rancher's farm because he said to the sheriff, "You got to come see what this damn creature did to my prize bull." When we went back there and the sheriff was panning the pasture with his spotlight, the bull was like just bleeding out with no head. The head was 100 yards away on the other side of the pasture, and you could see like there was definitely footprints of the creature where the bull was dead. You know what I mean? So that's how we just assumed. I mean, I don't know if the cattle rancher seen him do it or if he just heard the scream and he came out blasting. You know what I mean? Because on our little development, we had a lot of action. Like in the beginning of the story experience, a friend of ours his father owned a horse ranch down the street and would take tours out in the Everglades. You know, he had this wild Mustang or whatever it was from Wyoming or Montana. He had a Native American Seminole trying to break this horse, so he put it in the corral. He couldn't put it in the stalls because if he did, it would kick and made all the other horses nuts. So he left it in the corral one night. And one night we were sitting, again, it was late, 12:30, 1 o'clock, because my brother-in-law had just come home from this restaurant. He had an Italian restaurant, and he used to bring us like burnt pizzas at the end of the night. We would sit up and eat burnt pizzas. And we heard a blasting coming from the horse rancher's farm. And when we ran to the front of the house, we could see like a muzzle flash of a 30-30 going off. Bomb, 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 bomb. So we jumped on our dirt bikes and rode over to the house to see where it was because, you know, even it was still, you know, maybe 8 blocks away from us, even though it was everything is flat, so everything looks close. So we rode over there and we went over there and they told us what happened, that the Skunk Ape had snuck up on the wild Mustang in the corral, and the horse must have kicked out or something and jumped the corral and ran into the pasture. Well, the following day when we went over, the sheriff was there, everybody was there, and the whole neighborhood basically was there. And the Native American Seminole Indian rode out to the pasture to get the horse, and when he brought it back, the horse had handprints in its hind quarters, not claw marks. Handprints, like if I was to grab you by your wrist and squeeze as hard as I could and leave that indentation, that's what this horse had on its hind quarters. And that's why, you know, the Seminole Indian thought that the horse may have kicked out when he got grabbed, and that's when he jumped the corral and ran into the pasture. And like I said, my friend's father, he heard all the commotion. He came out blasting. So there was a lot of action going on on our little development. We were surrounded by swamps. There was a 1-lane bridge in and out of the development. It was, you know, pretty rural at the time.
That's incredible. And man, when you were 12 years old, so wild to have experienced that at such a young age. From, you know, you were able to see the creature a bit, it sounds like. But something I ask people is when you see the creature in some way, did you feel like you were looking more at something that was more human, or maybe something that's more ape, or something completely in the middle?
Well, the very, very first time that I laid eyes on the creature, my cousin and I were just going to bed, and my sister had a big picture window in her sunroom. It was like 8x4, and we had the pull-out couch. We were going to bed. Again, it was the wee hours. The house was surrounded in 3 sides by a 6-foot fence, but the front was open with a circular driveway with a fountain in the middle, and there were sensor lights on all the corners. And we were laying in bed, and the very first time we went by, we smelled a horrible smell. And my sister had 2 large German Shepherd canine shepherds, and they went crazy. And we had to put them in the garage. And then they told us it was the Skunk Ape, and we didn't believe her. We thought they would, you know, bust on our chops until we talked to our friends in the neighborhood who told us, yeah, you know, when it's hot like this, it comes around. And then a couple of weeks later, it was walking through our front yard, and the sensor lights went on. And as it was walking, we seen his huge shadow go across the wall in front of us, you know? And so I got out of the bed and I did like a belly crawl to the window, and I pulled open the shade to see what was out there. And I seen what looked like King Kong to me standing in the driveway. It had red eyes. I don't know if it was from the sensor lights, you know, eye shine from the sensor lights, but it had red eyes. It had canines. And I guess it had seen its reflection in the big picture window, and it did this like incredible Hulk kind of flex and scream, like almost like he was challenging another Skunk Ape. And when it was screaming, I thought it had seen me peeking out of the corner of the window and it was screaming at me, but hindsight being 2020 was probably the reflection on the window it seen. And when it walked along the side of the house, we had an empty lot by our side of our house that had wild watermelons in it. And as it was walking past the side of the house, my cousin and I ran into one of the bathrooms in between the kids' rooms. We left the lights off and we were watching it because as it walked past that corner, the sensor lights went on. And we were watching it and it was looking at us like it could see us in the dark. The windows were tinted, the screens were black. We left the light off in the bathroom and it never took its eyes off us, like it was watching us. And at one point it stopped, reached down, grabbed a wild watermelon, took a giant bite. There was left nothing but 2 nubs, dropped the nubs, walked to the back of the house. We ran to the back of the house because my sister had a screened-in patio. We went into the screened-in patio again. We left the lights off. As it walked past the back of the house, the sensor lights went on again. Again, the whole time, its top of its body tilted back, looking at us. Behind our house, there was a man who had a man-made lake. At that man-made lake, it squatted down and it cupped its hand and it drank the water out of the lake. And then it got up and it walked into the swamp where we used to go horseback riding, ride our dirt bikes and have bonfires and stuff like that. And then it just started screaming once it got into the swamp, And but like I said, that first time I seen it, I was behind that plate of glass that was like 1/8 of an inch thick or whatever how thick it was. And it was maybe, God, I would say no more than 25, 30 feet away from me. And it looked like King Kong. It was huge. And the way I got its height was because it was head and shoulders above that fence. And I know that fence was 6 feet tall to keep the dogs in. So it had to be between, 8 and 9 feet tall. I would say closer to 9 feet tall. And I use a rough estimate, 100 pounds per foot. So at 9 feet tall, it had to be a minimum of 900 pounds, probably closer to 15. I don't know. But it left 18-inch tracks along the side of the house in the sand. And my brother-in-law said he was going to come home from work and at lunchtime, and he was going to cast them, and he was going to put one on the bar in the house and one at the bar at the restaurant, But the restaurant got busy. He never came home. The horse tours went by, and they always rode right by our house along that empty lot, and they destroyed the tracks, so we never did get a chance to cast them. But I seen him up close and personal. And like I said, when you see these creatures up close and personal, your brain cannot comprehend what your eyes are saying. And they just can't.
That's absolutely incredible. After that point, was it, all bets are off, or was there a time in your life where you're like, this Bigfoot thing is cool, I'm going to get away from it for a little bit? Or were you like, I got to figure out what's going on from here on out and you're game on?
No, after we got back from Florida that summer, because that was our, my cousin Anthony. My cousin Anthony was closer to me than my brother. He was 15, I was 12. And that was our summer vacation. That was our summer camp. He would send us down there. And my brother-in-law, being an ex-Marine guy, he always had chores for us to do in the morning because in the afternoon it would get too hot. And then we would just go swimming in the pool or the man-made lake or ride our dirt bikes or whatever. But, when I came back from Florida that year, I had PTSD for 3 years, I couldn't sleep in my room at night. I would sleep my father was a carpenter, and what he did was he turned a front porch into a bedroom. So the bedroom was maybe 10 feet long and 6 feet wide. And the only window he had in his carpenter shop was a front window for a house. It had a big picture window in the front with 2 little windows on the side. So I always used to think that thing was going to reach in because its arms were so long, and I used to think it was going to come to New York, reach in that glass window and pull me out and take me away. And for 3 years, it was a rough 3 years at night, Then, that passed, and then, I got into girls and cars and stuff like that, motorcycles, and I kind of forgot about it for a long time. And then I started hanging out with a bunch of guys at work when I started working at the post office, and we started going out doing paranormal investigations, and one thing led to another. And, we always believed the guys I put together after my brother said to me at one point, it's great that you go out with your friends from the post office and do this, but you should put a real team together. And I was a member of a group called the New York, the Roundtable, the UFO Roundtable in Yonkers. And so I got all the guys from the Roundtable that were interested in it, and I put a team together and called it the Bronxville Paranormal Society, because originally everybody that was on the team either worked with me at the post office in Bronxville or lived in Bronxville. So that was our name. But then we all believed that everything was connected. We believed that it was all connected: ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoots, all of that stuff. We all had the same mindset. And that's how that led us out, going out and finding, these locations here in New York that are squatchy, and then researching those locations and having activity. And, I got 5 different locations. I work in 3 different counties. And I got one site called the Sacred Site that's never failed me. No, whenever I've gone there, I've always had experiences. And stuff is really, really getting crazy now, because I've started getting telepathic communications with them now. I had an ascension 2 years ago, and I guess it raised my vibration and frequency. And so I'm having these telepathic, but it's not just me having the telepathic communication. It's Chris Reinhardt in Connecticut from Discover Sasquatch, and it's my psychic down in Arkansas. We're all seeing the same Sasquatch. We're all interacting with the same Sasquatch in 3 different states, hundreds of miles apart, and it's just getting crazy now.
Can you describe the Sasquatch that you're all seeing in when you see that?
Yeah, he actually came to me, and when he came to me in a dream state, he told me his name was Alaric, a capital ALI dash capital REK. And he was a shaman. He was a king shaman. That's what he told me. And he was a healer. And he was the eldest statesman of my clan that I'm dealing with at the sacred site. And he showed himself to me 2 or 3 years earlier. I had seen a white Sasquatch on a parkway, but I was told I wasn't ready at that time when we locked eyes, And he's massive, just absolutely 10, 12 feet tall, 2,000 pounds. He's a beast. He demands respect. When I was in his presence, I felt like I was in the presence of royalty. My psychic in Arkansas, who I've been using forever, and she's never been blocked by anything. He's gone to her and told her that she's not going to be able to foresee anything at the sacred site when we go to do our investigations, because it's just for me and Chris. And Chris was actually in deep meditation one day, and he seen a white Sasquatch looking at him through the woods, and it shook him, and it knocked him out of his meditation. When I asked him what shook him, he wasn't being truthful to me. He goes, "Oh, it's just that it was white," but I had a feeling he wasn't telling me everything, And when I talked to my psychic in Arkansas, who does not know Chris doesn't even know who Chris exists, she needed the Sasquatch told her that she needed to start mentoring Chris psychically. So now she's mentoring Chris to develop his psyche. Because Chris was just like a flesh and blood guy. He didn't do anything paranormal wise, but he had an experience down in the Green Swamp, and he brought something dark home with him. And I had to call some people I knew on the paranormal side to cleanse his house and seal it, So this Sasquatch told her she needed to start mentoring Chris. And when she called me up and she's like, "Who's Chris Reinhardt?" And why am I supposed to mentor him? And I'm like, how do you know Chris, you know? And she said, this giant white Sasquatch came to me and told me that he was a king shaman and yada, yada, yada. And I need to start. And I was like, okay. And he told her that, don't try to foresee what's going to happen at the sacred site because he's going to block her and she won't be able to see. And we did go out recently and she was blocked. She couldn't see anything. She's like, he's got me blocked. I can't see nothing. Because she usually will look in at the situation and do like a remote view kind of thing, and see what's going to happen maybe ahead of time. But she couldn't see anything. It's very crazy. Just absolutely crazy. And then I had another experience with a different Sasquatch, a female, who told me her name was Hyanet, capital Hy and Hy, Hyatt, Hy, capital Neth, Hyanet. HYA, Hyanet, yeah, capital HYA-NETH. And she told me that she was excited that I was going back to the sacred site after 2 years because I was researching at other locations. And she was excited, and her clan was excited because she's the alpha male to meet Chris Reinhardt because they heard wonderful things about him. And I was like freaking out. I was like, is this real? Like, is this dream real? And I called not only my psychic, but other people I know who are connected to these creatures, or people, I should call them, psychically. And both of them, everyone just told me, yeah, this is really happening. This is really going on. And, you guys are going to have some amazing experiences when you go out because Chris is coming down here. And I'm going up to his location in the Berkshire Mountains. That's where he researches. And, and apparently this Alarek is going to come down and introduce himself to us and tell us what we're supposed to be doing or what he wants us to do. And it's just absolutely insane. Like when my psychic told me that she had the same vision that Chris, and then I asked her, I said, was there anything strange about him? And she said, the only really strange thing about him is that he's got these fireball red eyes. She goes, but don't be scared because he's not scary. It's just who he is. And the one I seen on the parkway had the same fireball red eyes. So then when I spoke to Chris one day and I said, what was it about that thing that freaked you out? What was like, was there something strange about him? And he goes, no. And he goes, was there something strange about the one you seen? And I said, yes, the one I seen had these fireball red eyes. And then Chris was like, okay, I got to come clean. Yeah, the one I seen had fireball red eyes. That's what knocked me out of my meditation. So we're all seeing the same guy. You know what I mean? And it's just crazy that like his Sasquatches are communicating with my Sasquatch is telling him, because he's had psychic, even though he doesn't believe in the psychic ability, like not that he doesn't believe it, he questions all of his experiences, because he's always been a flesh and blood kind of guy. And I told him, I said, Chris, the longer you do this, the stranger it's going to get, and you're not going to be that flesh and blood guy for long because things are going to get weird. And things have really gotten, he started having telepathic communications way before I did, and apparently Alarek is connected to me, him, and my psychic in Arkansas. So it's absolutely insane what's going on up here.
That is extremely intense and just a huge group of synchronicities for sure between, Alarek and Hyaneth. And that's wild. And I wanted to ask you, about the New York State Sasquatch organization. I'm sure most listeners are aware how large a state New York is. And I was just curious, how are you, narrowing down what area to go to for your research areas? Is there a, certain location that you try to focus on or anything like that?
Well, I'm at the southern tier of the Catskill Mountain Range, and the Catskill Mountain Range by itself is like 500,000 acres. Okay. And then you have the Adirondacks, about 3 hours, 2.5 hours north of me, which are like 6 million acres. Um, but the way I do it is I get I get pulled to locations. Like someone will say, you got to go here, you got to go here. Like I'm just being pulled there. And then when I go there, and I really don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking, and then I start to see all kinds of sign, arches and X and bends and breaks and twists and the little rock carrings that they make, those carrings that they build. I start seeing signs. And once I start seeing signs and I know I'm in a good location, then I'll go back and I'll start doing what we do. We have a couple of different things we do to try to make contact with them or to bring them in. You know what I mean? So we play with Tibetan singing bowls frequencies. We try to bring them in that way. Native American drum music or flute music. We'll bring them in. I like to, whenever I go out to do an investigation, I always go day, night, and I always go old school, new school. So, I know a lot of guys just are all high tech stuff. Sometimes those high tech stuff, the batteries die, they don't work, and you need that old school stuff to really bring everything together, And so I go out day, night. I know a lot of investigators or researchers that only go out during the day. And I tell them you're only getting about 10% of the activity you could be getting because these Sasquatch people are nocturnal. They hunt at night. They move at night. And you could get so much more. But I understand it's scary to be 4 miles in the woods, deep in the woods, not being able to run out if you had to because you're off trail and people are afraid. They're just afraid to be out there and vulnerable like that. But I don't go out with any subconscious fear in my head. And my psychic reads everybody who comes out with me. And if there's anybody on the group that's coming out with me and they have subconscious fear, they stay behind. They're not allowed to come. And so I never go out. I'm never afraid when I go out. I'm always looking for, not that I know what to expect. I mean, look, even if my psychic tells me what I'm going to expect, sometimes the stuff she says is so off the charts. I got to laugh at her, and she's the real deal. You know what I mean? Being from New York, I didn't believe in psychics for years until I met this woman. She's Native American. She's 5th generation. I tested her. She caught me every time I tested her. She's done stuff that absolutely blows my mind. Chris is dealing with her now, and Chris calls me every day. He's like, you're not going to believe what Cindy said now. I can't believe. How does she know this? And I said, she just does, man. I told you. She just does, And so I don't bring anybody out with me who has any subconscious fear because I don't want anything. And I tell people all the time, especially squatchers, guys who go in the woods, protect yourself not only physically, but spiritually. Because there is so much stuff in the woods that you don't know what you're going to run across. So you have to protect yourself spiritually. That was the problem with Chris when he went to the Green Swamp in Florida. He protected himself physically, but he wasn't thinking, paranormal wise, spiritually. And something dark attached to him and he brought it home to Connecticut, And thank God I had friends who lived not too far from him who were able to take care of it, but you have to protect yourself spiritually. And now, listen, Halloween is coming. They're going to have all those haunted attractions and cemetery tours. Protect yourself before you go into those attractions. Those attractions are attracting dark energy. Those I can't tell you how many people I know that have done a cemetery tour and had something come back dark attached to them. Protect yourself spiritually before you go on those tours, before you go in those haunted houses, before you go in those hay rides. Protect yourself spiritually. And if you're going out squatching, protect yourself spiritually and physically. I don't allow anybody to carry firearms when I go out because I don't trust anybody with a gun but me. And if I'm not carrying one, you're not carrying one. but we do go out with 18-inch machetes and 10-inch survival knives and pepper spray and stuff like that. I've been bluff charged, but not by a Sasquatch, by a Dogman, but that's a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never had anything bad happen to me at any of my locations. And I've been going to the sacred site forever, and I've never had anything bad happen to me there, So I'm very confident when I'm at my locations and I'm dealing with my group of my clan that I'm okay. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about anything messing with me at that point.
That is, absolutely true. When you get involved with certain things, you want to be aware of what you are getting into and how it can affect you, but also your home, your family. And you have to be very careful about how you position yourself with certain things. I had a weird question come into my mind, and it may not hit or anything, but have you ever gone to look at, do you know Catskill Game Farm?
Absolutely. Been there a million times.
Anything weird going on? I know it's an abandoned property now, right?
Yeah, but they've redone it up. They fixed it up to be an Airbnb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I will tell you an experience we had at the Catskill Game Farm when my children were young. We took them up there. We were up at the Catskills. There's a water park up there we used to go to, and the game farm wasn't far from the water park. We were walking into the park one day, and the Lions cage, or the Lions facility, was, God, it had to be a quarter mile away, and it was down in like a ditch, like a gully, right? And there was one lion that was just going off. The growls and the what this lion was doing, every other animal in the game farm was losing its mind. They were freaking out. It was so scary that as we were walking towards it, because I want to see the lion doing this, right? I'm all excited, like, oh my God, this is crazy, It's so deep and it's so powerful, and we're so far away, but yet you can feel its energy like go through you, And this thing is down in a gully like 50 feet below us, and it's coming up and going out. We got about 100 yards away from 50 yards away, and my wife and kids refused to go any further, but I went right down to it to see. And this lion, and I'm thinking, here's this lion that's maybe 500 pounds doing this, and it's got every animal in the game farm going nuts, and the infrasound that was going through me, vibrating my body, was terrifying, just terrifying. And I knew what it was, and I could see it doing it. And it was still, I was well protected. There's no way he could have jumped up out of that ditch to get me. So you can't imagine when a Sasquatch goes off in the middle of the woods and you're there to feel it. I can't emphasize enough the power they have that goes right through you. It's like getting hit with a shock wave from a bomb. You know what I mean? It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But I haven't heard anything like haunted at the Catskill Game Farm. I never heard anything like that. There are other locations up there, like some old abandoned Wild West villages that were like back in the 60s and stuff, 70s, were like Wild West attractions that I heard are abandoned, but I haven't heard anything about the game farm itself.
Ooh, that's such an interesting story with that lion. Just that very cool anecdotal story.